Okay, so we're going to continue with night renderings. Today, in exercise 224, we're going to do an interior night rendering. And so we've done the exterior day rendering. We've done the interior day rendering. Now it's time to switch to the interior night rendering. And the challenge here is not so much a change in geometry or a change in light settings. It's adjusting the exterior to be night instead of day. And so at this point, you have two choices. And I think I would suggest doing both. First off, we need to do a save as a backup, just in case something goes wrong and you want to go back and do a daytime rendering. Not a bad idea to do a save as in this process. So we're going to do that. And the second thing that we'll do is we'll save a Vray rendering file, a visopt file with all the settings that are currently working for the daytime, with the hopes that we could just reload the daytime and then ultimately reload the nighttime as we're going back and forth with the renderings and not need the backup file at all, which would be ideal. But just in case, always worth saving the backup. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Save As. And I'm going to save this as the master site, but I'll do -d for daytime rendering. And I'll click Save so that I have a backup. And then I'll go back to my regular master site file. This was my original here. If it decides to open for me here. Maybe, maybe not. There we go. And so this is the one that I'm ultimately going to work with. So I have a backup day file just in case I need to go back. Remember, because everything is set up as block references, it's not a big deal. Even if I update my building or anything changes, it'll still populate into the new scene. So all of that is good. My lights were already installed because I did my interior daytime rendering. I put all the V-Ray lights in, so everything's good anyway. So now I'm going to go to my V-Ray settings. I'm going to go to my V-Ray options here, clicking on the O button, and I'm going to save all of the V-Ray settings. So the hope is that I have everything set up. My environment files are set up. If I were to go in and look at these and preview them, I would get the actual preview. So all the things are set the way that I want them to be set. And I'm then going to click the Save button here. And when I click that Save button, this is going to be the file that I can reload all the daytime settings. So I'll put it in my flash drive. And I'm going to save this as the day visopt. I already have one called the day visopt, so I'm going to override that one, which is the V-Ray file for daytime for me. So I'll go ahead and click on Save. Yes, I want to replace it. Now the idea here is that I can go back, get that visopt file, and reload it, and it'll be the exact settings that I want it to be. So that's good. Now that that's saved, I need to start thinking about what am I going to do for a nighttime rendering? What is my environment going to look like for a nighttime rendering? And so to do that, I'm going to jump over to the V-Ray Quick Rendering Setups, which there's a link in today's exercise, or you can go to Resources, V-Ray Materials Library, and then V-Ray Quick Rendering Setups to get there. And we've worked before with the day scenes. You'll notice that following those day scenes, there's a few night scenes. A couple different options to choose from. They have slightly different backgrounds. This one has kind of a starry sky. It's a little blurry, so it's not my favorite, but it's there. This one here has kind of a light moon and some clouds or whatever. Well, you can barely see it on the projector. But they're just two different options. You can click on those and see them. The other thing that I believe qualifies as a night scene, and as far as your assignment goes, I'm okay with being a night scene, are the sunset scenes. Sometimes people like doing the sunset scenes. Technically speaking, the sunset isn't night because the sun just went down, but all your lights need to be on for the sunset scene to work. So any one of these sunset scenes I would find acceptable. They all have the sun below the horizon, so something like this. A lot of times people like that. And you can see in the example file here that I have that even though it's a sunny, or the sunset of the sky, the lights still show up nicely and whatever. So that would be fine with me as well. So there's three different options for you guys there. So in terms of setting these up, hold on, I have to sneeze. Maybe not. I'm going to sneeze soon, okay? Anyway, when you start to set these up, I've tried to make it easy for you. First off, I have the VisOpt file that you can preload that gives the bulk of the settings for you, so you can download those. So once you pick one of these, and we'll do this basic night scene 2, for example. Oh, no, maybe I won't because the file isn't there. I'll do the basic night scene 1. You'll need to download the background image, the HDRI, and then you'll download this VisOpt file. So I'll go ahead, right-click on it, save link as, and I'll save it into my resources. There's my night, and this one was the Milky Way, and I bet I already have the VisOpt file there. We'll go ahead and replace it. There it is. And so then I can switch over into my master site, and before I load my Vray options, before I load my Vray VisOpt file, open one of the drawers so that you can see that it's open, because once it loads, it'll close the drawers. So it's an easy way of visually seeing that it works. And then I'll click on the load setting here, and I'll go back into my resources, Vray, HDRI, night HDRI, and there it is. And I'll click open. And once it loads, it closes all the drawers. So I know it loaded correctly. But just like with the day HDRI, I need to go through and make sure that it's recognizing where the skylight or the GI and the background files are. So I'll click on the M. And if I preview it and I get the gray square, it means it's not finding it. So we need to go find it. It is in my resources folder. It's in Vray, HDRI, night HDRI, and it was the Milky Way. And it's going to be, which one's it looking for? There we go, Milky Way small. Preview, there it is. And this one in the background here, it's also the small. There we go. So now those two are loaded correctly. And now it's a matter of going ahead and performing the render. A couple things before we get into the render. First off, under Output, I'm going to uncheck the, I'm going to unlock and get the view aspect, because my view aspect might be different than the one that I originally created. Then I'll lock it again. Remember, we're going to set this really small to start, so we can get just a preview render. I also don't want to render this particular interior view because I'm not going to see much outside. So I'm going to switch my interior view to be the first one that I did here, because I can look out the windows and see that it's gone. Okay, so I have those set up. A couple other things before I do a render. The VfB channels, I've mentioned it a few times in the handouts, and I haven't really emphasized this too much. But the VfB channels, essentially, when Vray does a rendering, it does more than just the color rendering. It saves other information for us. And so I'm suggesting that you turn on the RGB color, the alpha, the diffuse, and then some of these are optional. The reflection, there's no harm in doing it. The shadow, the lighting, and I'll show you these as I do the render. I like render ID and material ID. Those can be very, very useful in Photoshop afterward. Z-depth is also a must. Okay, so I've checked those. I do background too. And there's a lot that I skip over as part of these. It doesn't take any more time for Vray to do these channels. It does them anyway. So it's just a matter of, do I display them and or do I show them? So I'm gonna have those checked so that they're good to go. If you loaded the preset, it should have already loaded those anyway. Okay? So I have those things set up. I have a small file to do my test rendering in. The last piece of this is I have to make sure that I turn my sun off. So I'm going to go to my environment layer, I'm going to look for my sun, and I'm going to turn it off. If I left the sun on, I'd get the starry sky with sunlight. So it just doesn't quite work. The other thing that might be worth your time is turning off any of your bunch grass or any of that kind of stuff that you might have in the scene that's outside that you can't see from this particular view. It doesn't make sense to calculate that as part of the rendering, so go ahead and turn that off. If you used glass that was like the skyscraper glass, for example, on your exterior to get more reflective glass, switch it in the night view to be a basic glass because it's not going to render correctly if it's that highly reflective. So a lot of you just use regular glass anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, but I like to at least mention that. So once all that's set up, I'm going to go ahead and do the render. I will confirm before I do the render that I turn on distributed rendering because these are going to start to be a little taxing. So let me find the render farm if it's up. Oh, how nice. One unused spawner. So we'll take that one. And I'll say, OK, at least I have that one. And then we'll do a little test render. So I'll click on the render button, and we'll have a look. So bear with me for a little bit while this render happens. OK, so the background sky is dark, but it looks like my light source, my sun, is still on. So maybe it wasn't on the sun layer correctly. So I need to go find that and make that correction. So let me zoom out here. I'm going to use the command SEL light just to take a look at what's going on. Looks like my sun is right there on that upper corner, and it didn't turn off. So let me take that sun, there it is, make sure it goes on the sun layer. There we go. And let me switch back to that interior view. And we'll do that render again. So you can already tell, even though it's blurry, that this window here doesn't have that brightly lit grass. So I'm on the right track now. It's possible that you'll have to adjust the exposure of your camera slightly, depending on how light or dark it turns out. But essentially, there you go. Now I have the black outside, representative of night. And then I also have my lights showing up how I want them, which is good. I told you about those extra channels in rendering. They're accessible up here. You see RGB color is shown. If I click the drop down, these are all the different channels that I selected. So, for example, alpha will show us what's solid and then what's background. So we can see this gray is really far away. This is up close to me. And then the black is the background. If I move down here, it's not, this gray is not because it's really far away, it's because it's transparent. It's semi-transparent. That's why it's gray. That's what alpha is. Solid, semi-transparent, and fully transparent, which is up in the sky. As I move forward down the list here, Z-depth, I didn't get much out of this. We'll fine-tune Z-depth when we do the exterior rendering, but essentially what that does is it takes a grayscale from white to black. The closer your objects, the closer the objects are, the more white they are. The further away, the more black they are. And that gradient then can do some special post-processing in Photoshop, which I will show you later on. Background gives us just what the background is. Diffuse, there we go, shows us just without any shadows or lights or anything else what's solid or what diffuse is with the materials on it. As we come down the list here, lighting shows us just the lighting. Material ID, let's try render ID. Render ID is showing us, and again, this is jagged because my rendering is so small and I blew it up, but it's showing us what every individual pane is in the rendering, which really easily, using a color select in Photoshop, would allow us to adjust one material or one particular surface. So it's not that you would use this directly, it's that you'd use it as a way of selecting something in Photoshop. So it can be useful as well. Material ID is supposed to be the same thing, except it's set, all the materials are one color, and I don't know why it didn't turn out correctly. Reflection would be any of the reflections, so you can see what's being reflected, where the light is, etc. And the last one would be shadow, where are the shadows in a particular scene. So you've got all those pieces working together, and if you think about Photoshop, or if you have experience in Photoshop, you can see where some of these might be useful down the road. So once I have all of these, it's worth it to get in the habit of, 1, turning them on, and 2, saving all of them. So there's a multiple save disk available up here. If you click on this, it will save all the channels in addition to your RGB. So you'll get your main one plus all your channels. It doesn't cost any more render time to do this. So if you get in the habit of it, it's just going to make your life easier, especially when you start doing more Photoshop post-processing. Okay? So if you haven't finished, putting blocks of furniture in, you haven't put art on the walls, you haven't done the things that you want to do, now's your time to keep working on it. You have the rest of the day to just keep working. I mean, you can see that I give you lots of time to work on this stuff because you need lots of time to work on this stuff. We will do, obviously, the exterior night rendering. I will do a demo of how do you create water, exterior water, like a pool. I'll do a pool, essentially, because people like pool. I'll do that as a night rendering, so we'll turn a light on in the pool. So that's part of it. People like that particular demonstration. So that's coming. But in addition to that, right, we've already kind of covered 4 of the basic renderings that you need. The interior night and day, the exterior night and day. We will have done those 4. We will then be moving in the semester into creating line drawings from your model. So we'll do a plan, we'll do a section, we'll do an elevation. We will do a sectional rendering, so you'll get full color rendering of a section too. Those are the things that are out there still, that we're still trying to cover. I do spend a lot of time emphasizing those line drawings because if you do a lot of work modeling, there's no reason you shouldn't have good quality line drawings out of your modeling. So those of you that are in 220 that have been modeling along the way, now you'll finally be able to use your model to create the good line drawings, or at least that's the hope. We will obviously spend time doing sections too, because I think sections are particularly valuable. You spend all this work doing the interior, why not have a section view that shows the interior? So we will be doing that. By the way, as of today, you're about 3/4 of the way through the semester by my days. At least in terms of instructional days, when I talk to you, it's about 3/4. You have about 8 instructional days left. So you're moving right along. So we'll go through this. Channels, perfect, sounds good. You're going to do this rendering. Remember to save all your channels. Once you have this set up the way you like it, go back into your V-Ray options and save, just like we did with the day rendering. Save it as a night rendering. The idea here is that you'll be able to flip back and forth between the day and the night. And assuming you're on the same computer with the same drive layers, it should recognize really easily all your background HDRIs and that sort of thing. Couple side notes as we go forward here. Let me just save this really quick. This would be the night VisOpt. If you're doing the sunset views, pay careful attention to some of the settings. So if I come down here into the sunsets, like this one in particular, doesn't actually have a sun, but there's a much higher background. It's set to 30. Because of the sunset, you want that orangey casting onto your building. So we've really bumped that value up to give you a little bit more. Likewise, this GI skylight value is much higher than usual. So sometimes on these sunset ones, they get a little weird. So pay attention to what's written down here. The VisOpt file should load those anyway, but double check and make sure that they're doing what you want to do. In those sunset ones, you should be turning off the sun, I believe. Well, this one here the sun is technically there because it's just right down low parallel. These other ones, this one the sun's off completely, and this one it's pretty low. If you look at the images, you can kind of tell where it is. You could probably get away with it being off. It's just the right amount of light. So feel free to try any of those. I've seen very good results from the sunset night renderings as opposed to the true night renderings. But either one is perfectly acceptable as you go forward. Are there any questions? I know today was short on my end, but it gives you a lot of time to work today. So use it wisely. Get yourself a little bit further along. Trust me, when we get to the line drawings, the sections, the elevations, and that sort of thing, you want your model to be done because there's plenty of other stuff to do that's not modeling. So it's time to start wrapping that part of it up. Okay?